welcome back to my channel. My name is Marissa and this channel is dedicated to helping individuals to find freedom with food and also recover from an eating disorder. Now in this week's video, what I really want to talk about is the inappropriateness of going all into healthy eating when in recovery from any form of disordered eating. And the reason I want to talk about that is because a massive part of my own recovery from anorexia involved jumping between orthorexia, obsessions with healthy eating, and also dipping my toe into the wonderful world of veganism. Now, without causing too much conflict, I can say right here that I'm actually not vegan now, nor am I obsessed with healthy eating or follow any rigid form of diet or any diet for that matter. But I just think it's really important to talk about because I think it's so easy when in recovery from an eating disorder to try and find something that we really latched onto within that disorder in another form of eating. And one of those things can be the need for connection, maybe other people following a similar diet. And the other thing is also permission to eat. So if your eating disorder has involved feeling really guilty around certain foods and not giving yourself permission to eat unconditionally, then a diet or a particular way of eating or an obsession with nutrients, counting calories, or an obsession with anything related to food really, can actually give you that structure and sense of routine and permission to eat. And although that might feel good initially because you feel great and maybe eating more, I might be eating really healthily, then actually what you're doing is just trading healthy eating for your eating disorder and actually not really getting rid of what you were suffering from. It's kind of a little bit like a trade-off. You may recover to a certain extent, but personally I was never able to fully recover or get to a really good place in recovery the more that I latched onto nutrition and calories and thinking about how much I needed to eat, when, why, and having to think about all the benefits of food before I even put it anywhere near my mouth. Thinking about healthy eating all of the time when you're going to choose something to eat is actually so draining. And to be quite honest, it doesn't feel so dissimilar from being so entrenched in an eating disorder such as anorexia. Because although you may be eating, you're still basically encouraging your brain to think of food as something that needs to be controlled, to be judged, to be weighed and measured in a physical way or just in a mental way. And again, it's not really full recovery, in my opinion anyway. So firstly, I wanted to talk about how food is not just about nutrition. Now this is quite ironic of me to say because weirdly I spent a good 5 or 6 years of my life studying nutrition, dietetics and public health. Yes, I spent that many years of my life dedicated to food, really because I was still obsessed with food. And during that time I was still very much entrenched in my eating disorder, and even though I may have had some intelligence because I must have been able to get to university, I was still so warped around food and believed that every little ounce and morsel of things that I ate had to be controlled. And I thought that that was in the benefits of eating healthy, having a long life and avoiding heart disease and cancer and all the things that people relate to food. But let me tell you right now that our understanding of nutrition is so small and limited. Even as someone who qualified in nutrition, in reality, even though we have a lot of research about what to and what not to eat or what to avoid for certain lifestyles, in reality, every single body is different. And for example, I have family members who literally put lard and butter in most things that they eat and they're nearly at the age of 90. So surely other lifestyle factors are involved in health. And when you actually look at the bigger picture in epidemiology studies, what you actually find is that it's not just about what we eat, but why we eat, who we eat with, the things that make up our lifestyles such as stress, smoking, physical activity. And you often find that the healthiest people are those who are not controlled around food, but who eat in social settings, who eat because they're passionate about food and enjoy food, and also people who are quite active but not in an obsessive way, people who might take a stroll once or twice a day and are just generally quite happy people inside. And if you've ever been obsessed with nutrition, healthy eating, or have had an eating disorder, you might have not had a minute to relax, because I can guarantee at least some point you've had a bit of an anxiety attack about eating something that's off your restricted section, or on your restricted section of foods to and to not eat. So as a human being, I know that food isn't just about nutrition. Yes, some people may say that, and we eat to live, and that really we shouldn't eat for pleasure or eat because, we want to gain something nice from food in terms of an experience. But how sad would a life of living like that be? So I can't really compare myself to an animal such as a dog, a cat, or something in the wild that may just eat functionally. Because as a human being, and you as a human being, we have very complex social and mental structures in our brain that mean that food has so much more significance than just fuel. And one of those things is the need for social connection. The need to eat with others is quite a relaxing and pleasurable experience that builds connection and trust, which is vital. It's vital for health as well, to be able to trust members of your community. And let's be honest, would we have as many nostalgic and beautiful memories if we didn't have those memories associated with food? So as an example, when I used to spend time with my grandparents, which I used to love, on a Saturday we would always have chips, fish, and then in the afternoons my granddad would go out, buy us 2 custard tarts each, which we would eat, and then in an evening we'd probably have something similar to a fry up, and we'd sit around the table together, maybe watch something on TV at the same time, and we'd also eat a hell of a lot of chocolate on an evening just because it was fun to do, and it really just made the evening and family environment together. But I'm really grateful that I had those memories attached to food because they're now embedded in my brain much better. Now, the only way I can describe this in a simple way is that when we eat certain foods and they elicit a pleasurable response, maybe things like donuts, biscuits and cakes and all these other things that we may have restricted, what that does is it elicits kind of like a pleasure response in the brain, but also a memory system that associates that pleasurable experience with whatever we're doing at the time and whoever we are with. So by token of eating things that we might see as unhealthy, what we are doing is securing a future where we also have great positive memories around food. We're also able to rewire negative feelings around food, because if you just ate crisp cracker breads with no butter or spread on, then imagine how dull of a memory you might have, or a duller memory than you may have had if you'd have eaten something that you generally wanted to eat. Now, I personally would have never chose to eat some carrot sticks or a salad if I was with my grandparents or my parents on a day out. No, we'd go out to the cinema and get popcorn and our favourite sweets. And I remember those times not just because of the sweets, but it was just that cosy nostalgia and enjoyability that was made a little bit better by having that essence of pleasurable food there, if that makes sense. I don't know anybody or any normal person who takes, some salad into the cinema or walks along a beach with a superfood smoothie rather than an ice cream or taking some popcorn into the cinema. So I know that going forward in my recovery isn't just about viewing food as calories and nutrition, because it's just not conducive to a positive life where you're able to create new nostalgic memories with food and family and friends. Another point to mention is that healthy eating is basically sometimes swapping out anorexia for something that can be equally as disordered. So although an eating disorder may involve restricting large quantities of food and losing a significant amount of weight, you can also still engage in disordered eating and live a very sad life when you're eating enough energy, but eating things that are still in some way restricted. So I know by basically suffering from something called orthorexia, which is an obsession with healthy eating, I was so miserable. I thought I was doing the right thing because I was justifying what I was eating based on its health value. But in reality, could I go out for a meal with family? No, at least not easily anyway. Could I order something off a menu without panicking? No. Could I go out with my boyfriend and order pizza or go to the cinema with popcorn? No. And again, I was just instead thinking that my life could be structured on some form of rigid routine around calories, nutrition, and keeping everything in a safe box. I wasn't really challenging fears that I'd had for years, even though I thought I'd got to a good place in recovery. How is that recovery if you still have fear around food? And I really think that's an important point to mention here, because You may feel at a completely healthy weight for your body, or someone's told you that you're now healthy after being in recovery from an eating disorder for years, and yet there's still things that you're not able to do around food and you don't have full freedom around food. How is that recovery? Have you not swapped one eating disorder for another, even though it's not maybe typical anorexia, bulimia, or some other form of disorder that's in a manual? If you're not able to live spontaneously around food, then that is permission enough to change things up and really tackle fear head on. So one thing I like to remember is that avoiding fear, like the motivation to avoid fear and the motivation for health, are two very different but very overlapping things, especially in recovery. So in my recovery, I honestly thought for years that my motivation to eat for health was completely valid, when in actuality, the reason that I was so obsessed with health is because I still had this massive underlying fear of certain foods. In fact, I was actually avoiding fear rather than being motivated for health. Only over the last, say, 2 years or so, through tackling every single fear food head on, eating everything under the sun that I thought was bad and unhealthy and had too many calories in, only then have I really gained full happiness and freedom with food. And there are things that I'm still working on in terms of letting go of control and maybe eating things more spontaneously throughout the day. But I absolutely love that I can now eat some chocolate in the middle of the day, or just go and have cake for my birthday, or any other day for that matter. And I was in a cafe a few months back with a friend, and we decided to share a piece of cake together, like one each, but shared the experience together. And I remember thinking, this is so much more of a thing to aim for in life than to sit here with a friend while I eat a safe snack bar that has like dates and nuts in and not much else, while she sits there and enjoys the experience with something that she truly wants. And I thought, does that mean she's a less healthy person than me if I'd had a healthy snack option and she'd have had cake? No. In fact, I really look up to people who have such a free relationship around food because it's something I now aspire to. I also just want to say here that if you are stuck in a cycle of feeling like you need to eat really healthy or count nutrition and count calories, then it doesn't mean you're a bad person or you're unintelligent. It's so easy to get a warped mindset around food, especially when you've come from a background of anorexia, because it will do absolutely anything for you to keep it in you in some way. And I know that sounds bizarre, but if you ever let your food become something that needs to be controlled or judged in some way, you're basically activating the same neural networks in your brain that activates anorexia. So it's like these double parallel lines that are easy to cross over at any point. So for me, my obsession with healthy eating always made me so prone for a relapse that sent me back into anorexia, and not in a way that I may have lost a significant amount of weight, but it's so easy to get stuck in that mind control view of what you should and shouldn't eat, and basically making your life so teeny tiny small that there's no room for life to come in. This is a reason why I feel personally, and I know this is quite controversial to say, but I really feel like a lot of people with eating disorders tend to veer down the line of going to study nutrition or become vegan or to go full-blown vegetarian because they want to justify through some other means their need to eat food. Because anorexia does the exact same thing. It gives you rules and regulations about when and why you shouldn't eat, or when you should eat and exactly what. Now, a great exchange for that is something like veganism. And even though a lot of people do it for ethical reasons, and I thought I did it for ethical reasons to begin with, what you actually find is a lot of the rules become very overlapping with how anorexia used to treat us too. So when you have a rule book about what you can't eat and why, you have a whole new moral system around food, which for me is treading on eggshells to basically invite your anorexia back in. It's not to say that if you've had an eating disorder you can never be vegan or understand what veganism is fully. But for me personally, even though I'm really passionate about the welfare of the planet and animals, I knew that firstly and foremost there were things that I need to tackle in my mind, particularly fears around certain foods, in order for me to make a full and informed judgment about what I should and shouldn't be eating. And in fact, coming away from veganism, which was really, really hard because I developed a whole identity around it and community and a moral code system in my brain. But coming away from it made me realise that, wow, it's so easy, again, to trick yourself into thinking that food needs to be controlled, when really what we need to do first is give ourselves full permission to eat all foods, anything, even if it is things that feel morally wrong initially. And again, that's controversial to say, but at the same time, when you do that, you can eradicate all fear around food and then give yourself permission to decide how you want to ethically eat. Because how can we think about ethics when we're still fearing certain foods for a different reason? Like, I was so easily able to avoid things like cakes and biscuits and sweets for years because I was able to use veganism as an excuse. And even though I've always loved animals and really believed that I was avoiding dairy and other things because of animals, in reality there was still fear attached to it. So if you are truly wanting to even be vegan or vegetarian, first and foremost, get rid of all fear around food. Get to a place of full recovery. Restore your health optimally. And when you genuinely feel as though you have no fear or qualms around food, then you are in the driving seat of your own life to decide. But until then, let's take the pressure off ourselves to eat perfectly and healthy and have this halo effect around food. Because food doesn't need any moral code. It doesn't need you to justify why or when or how much you eat. You need to give yourself full permission for all types of food, myself included, and this is something I am still working on passionately, even though some days it's really, really hard. I know in the long run it'll be so worth it because the memories we will gain around food and the love of food and being able to make food a positive part of life rather than a fearful and dreaded one. Wow, how much more life will we gain from that. So, as you can tell, I've blabbered on a lot in this video. I'm even short of breath and need a drink. But I'm so grateful for you taking the time to watch this video. And even if you've just related to one thing, then that makes me feel brilliant. I just really love to help in some way if I can. Please just take a few of these points in mind when you're thinking about going on a new healthy eating regime or continuing to count calories or to venture into something like veganism. Just remind yourself about what truly is important, and your health comes first. So on that note, thanks for listening all this time, and hopefully I will speak to you very soon. Bye.